Hi, and welcome to another episode of the AnxietyRX Podcast. Today, I am going to talk about a little stream of consciousness thing again. I've been working a lot with people with anxiety lately. I'm not sure exactly why, and it's not typically clients, it's friends, it's people that have just come up to me in my daily life, massage therapists, just people in my daily life that said, hey, what do I do about my anxiety? It's getting worse. And I think it is getting worse for us. I think anxiety is basically separation, and we are getting more and more separate from each other all the time. We've never lived in a world that was more open and free and had food to eat and had shelter over our heads and had as little war as we have going on now. Now, that's a little bit different now because of Ukraine and Israel. But in general, human beings have never done this well with not having day-to-day scary worries. Now our worries are more internal. The worries we had before were external. When we were younger, our species was younger, we had specific things that were scary. Warring tribes, war, famine. Now we have this sort of affluent anxiety that we have. And I think on some levels it can be kind of worse. I used to have this joke on stage that I would do about stand-up, and I would say, if you're poor and depressed, well, you got a good reason to be depressed because you're poor. But if you're rich and depressed, you're screwed because you don't have a good reason. Now, that leans into the fact that money doesn't buy happiness, but today, I kind of wanted to talk about how this anxiety just starts to take us over. And as a society, begins to crush us, begins to separate us even more from each other. And I think the way that we heal as a society externally and internally is to really pay attention to what happens internally within ourselves. And the book that I wrote, Anxiety RX, is all about recognizing the alarm in your body, because it's the alarm in your body, typically from old unresolved childhood wounding, that is creating the anxiety in your mind. This old unresolved energy is stuck in your body, and it's not coming out because we're not giving it the proper place to come out. So today I wanted to talk about, where do you feel your alarm? Have you listened to me? Do you understand what I'm talking about when I say that you're not anxious, you're alarmed? Your body is alarmed, and your mind is basically just making up stories that are consistent with that alarm. Because if you have a lot of alarm in your system, you're not going to make up stories about puppies, picnics, and cookies. You're going to make up stories about your relationships falling apart, or your parents are dying, or whatever it is. And whatever you focus on, you get more of. So if you focus on these stories that you're telling yourself that are based on this old alarm that's in your system, it becomes this self-reinforcing, self-reverberating, self-feedback loop of alarm in your body, creating anxious thoughts in your mind, and the anxious thoughts of your mind creating more alarm in your body. Or perhaps more correctly, the anxious thoughts of your mind distracting you from actually treating, metabolizing, and resolving this alarm that's stuck in your body. So I tell people, where's the alarm in your body? Can you find it? When you're having an anxious day, can you scan your body? Can you see where this anxiety is actually showing up as alarm inside of you? Now check the midline of your body between your chin and your pubic bone, because that's usually where it is. Most people will have their alarm in their throat, in their heart, in their chest, in their solar plexus, in their belly. It's usually around the midline somewhere. So find it. Find your alarm. Does it have a characteristic? Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it sharp? Is it dull? Is it superficial? Is it deep? Does it have a color? Does it have a shape? Is it associated with any sensations, images, emotions? Really go into this alarm, because this is the root cause of what your suffering is this alarm. Your mind is only responding to this alarm that's stuck in your body. That's what's happening, is your mind is making up all these warnings, what ifs, worst case scenarios, because your body has stored this alarm that you've kind of pushed down for so long. And it's the alarm's way of coming up by creating these worries in your mind. So it's finding the alarm in your body. When you're anxious, when you see your mind is going at a mile a minute, it's not your mind, it's your body that's creating the energy for this. So let's go right at the source. Let's find the alarm in your body. I'm reading this book right now that I'm quite enjoying called The Gap and the Gain. And it's a book for entrepreneurs mostly. It was recommended to me by a friend, and I'm reading it and I'm really loving it. And it's really about the gap, how we live in the gap so often, especially as anxious people. And the gap is this place where we are uncertain about our future, we're uncertain about our past, a lot of negative self-image, a lot of comparing ourselves to others, a lot of taking what societal reference and culture reference means for success and then transposing that onto our lives as, is this what I should be doing? And I think we're such creatures of culture now, especially with social media, that we are being trained, indoctrinated, if you will, into this idea of success. And usually it's monetary. Sometimes it's fame. There's a lot of stuff going out now about children. Children are being polled in schools, like, what do you want to be? And it's like 80% of them want to be famous. That's their career goal. Doesn't make sense. But it does make sense when you look at it in terms of culture. So returning to this idea of recognizing your alarm, where do you feel it? So I'm out walking my dogs this morning, and I noticed there was this Instagram post that kind of triggered me. This post about anxiety that I thought wasn't accurate, but yet the person has a tremendous amount of followers. It was a very cognitive explanation of anxiety, which I typically don't like because I don't think that anxiety at its root core is cognitive. I think anxiety at its root core is a state of alarm that's stuck in our bodies. So I was upset. I was really feeling like, man, they just don't get it. It just doesn't work that way. And then of course I go in my mind, well, maybe you're wrong, Russ. Maybe your whole theory isn't accurate, which of course sent me into a deeper state of alarm, which of course created more anxiety. But what I realized was from reading this book, it's like, okay, right now I'm in the gap. I'm comparing myself to other people. I'm comparing myself to an ideal that not only do I think is accurate, but I don't want to compare myself to. And then it really came to me that how much time do I spend evaluating my own theories, comparing them to somebody else? Is this accurate? Because I question my own theories quite a bit. And it was really troubling for me. And then I realized, oh, you're in the gap. And then I noticed that when I'm in the gap, I'm also in alarm. So my old solar plexus is all lit up like a Christmas tree. And it's like, oh, okay, well, this is where this is coming from. All right. So comparing myself to others puts me in this state of alarm, which of course triggers my anxiety. And I get into that alarm anxiety loop. So what if I just stayed with the alarm? What if I practiced this thing that I talked about on one of my podcasts before called Objecting Without Contracting by Kathy Kane, PhD. So it's this idea that you can feel this alarm, but you don't have to contract around it. You don't have to give it the next step in the sequence. Because what I find with me is that I'll feel this alarm, and then all of a sudden I'll feel negatively about it, and I'll not want to have it. I don't want to have this feeling of alarm. So I will squeeze around it. I will try and, sequester it. I don't know exactly what happens, but there's a resistance to feeling this alarm. And in that resistance, I think it sets off this whole cascade of what I call the alarm anxiety cycle. So if I can stop the resistance, if I can just allow myself to feel my disgruntlement with this particular Instagram post and just allow it to sit there without adding thoughts to it, without trying to make myself specifically feel better, just sitting there with the discomfort and not squeezing around it, just staying with that discomfort. Now, sometimes our alarm is triggered because of some deep emotional, usually childhood wound, and it's really painful. because it takes us back to that time we were 5, 6, 8, 12 years old and helpless and scared. And our amygdala has no sense of time. So when we go into this alarm, we go into this gap, we transpose ourselves in time back to that place where we felt scared with all the wherewithal of an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old. But we don't realize that we have all the wherewithal of a 9-year-old because we assume that we're adults. But in those cases, when we start getting deeper and deeper into alarm, I would suggest that we become children. I would suggest that we become more and more age regressed and more, more and more anxious. So at that point, I started going, okay, well, what feels good in my body? This is something called oscillation or pendulation and something called somatic experiencing therapy. So I felt my solar plexus with this jealousy or whatever it was I was feeling towards this particular social media post. And then I went into my face and it's like, okay, I was outside. So I was breathing the air, just allowing the air to come in and out of my nostrils and my face and through my sinuses and into my lungs, and allowing my shoulders to drop, relaxing my jaw. I've been doing this for a long time, so I'm kind of zoning myself out right now. I should probably stop it. And then going back into this place in my solar plexus of alarm. And the Instagram post didn't seem so bad at that point because my alarm was down. It's your alarm that really dictates how you feel about things. It's not so much your thoughts. Your thoughts become the runaway train, but it's really that sense of alarm. So what I was doing is I was going back and forth between this feeling of alarm in my solar plexus being triggered by this particular post, and then going into my face and my lungs and feeling relaxed and not objecting, not contracting around it, just allowing it to be there. And I think so much of anxiety work is that people only work on their anxiety when they're feeling anxious or alarmed. The other thing I wanted to bring in was, can you work on this anxiety when you're having a good day, when you're feeling good? Because we know where our alarm is. And when I'm having a great day, I'm out golfing or in the sun or whatever, I'll put my hand on that solar plexus. And if I really focus on it, I can feel the alarm that's in there. And I can just sit with it and just allow it to process. And I think so often what we don't do is we don't bring our alarm up to the surface when we're having a good day, when we're feeling good. And this is a brilliant time to bring up this old pain because we're resourced. Our bodies are resourced. Our minds are resourced. We have this ability now to kind of pendulate or oscillate between this good feeling that we have and this alarm and get a chance to metabolize it and change it and integrate it. Take these disparate parts that are making up this alarm in our system and bring them into a functional whole. But when we're deep in alarm and we try and fix it, all our resources are going to survival. So I guess the point of this, and I didn't know it when I started recording today, but it's about, can you work on your anxiety when you're feeling good? Because a lot of times when we're feeling good, we don't want to work on our anxiety. It's like, I'm glad that it's not here today. I'm glad that it's not around, and I'm just going to keep it that way. But I'm slowly learning, or I learned in the last few years, that that's one of the best times to actually start bringing it up, finding the alarm in your system, even though it's much less intense because you're feeling good in general. That's a great time to bring it up to the surface. So it's working on your anxiety when you're not anxious. Because most people, especially my friends who call me for advice when they're anxious, are anxious when they call me. And there's only a limited amount of help I can give them at that point. So the lesson in this podcast today is about, can you bring your anxiety, your alarm, up to the surface when you're having a good day, when you're feeling good? Because after all, that alarm is your younger self, is that scared, frightened, not felt enough, not loved enough child in you. And if you're feeling good and you're resourced enough to give that child in you some love and some attention and some care, and to show them that you see them, you understand them, you love them, you'll protect them, that's the best time to do it. Because if we only try and help our anxiety when we're feeling anxious, again, we're already compromised. But when you're feeling good, this is a time to find your alarm. It's going to be in the same place. I guarantee you, if you have it in your heart, it's going to be in your heart. If it's in your solar plexus, it's going to be there too. Put your hand over it. Bring that alarm into your good day and show them in no uncertain terms that this alarm isn't all of them. It's not all of them. And I got to say that again because it's so critical. That alarm is not all of you. That alarmed child that sits in that place in your body is not all of them. But when we can bring that child up to the surface and show them they're seen, heard, loved, and protected in a time that we're really resourced, we have a much greater chance at metabolizing that alarm and showing that child that, hey, this scary place that you were in back when you were 5, 7, 8, 12 years old, you're not there anymore. You're here with me now. I'm resourced. I've got the ability to look after you now that maybe I don't have when I'm feeling anxious myself. So what I'm saying, I haven't said it enough already, is that you have the power when you're feeling good to connect with that younger version of yourself and show them that this alarm isn't all of them. It's not all of you either. And in that, you have a chance to metabolize that alarm so that it changes, it starts to release. And if you don't restrict around it, if you don't resist it, it can release even more. So a lot of healing from anxiety is not resisting it, allowing it to be there, seeing it as your younger self, bringing it up when you're not anxious, when you're having a good day, connecting with that alarm because you're truly connecting with that younger version of yourself. And that's when we get some real traction in healing our anxiety. So that's it for this week. We'll see you next week on the AnxietyRX Podcast. And thanks.